So we are now moving on to what is an imaginary number. So we are now in Unit 1 and we are looking at the information with regards to what is an imaginary number. Imaginary numbers are numbers that can be written as a multiple of the imaginary unit I, where I is the square root of -1. So the letter I, which stands for imaginary, is used to denote that number, the square root of -1. So instead of writing square root of -1, you just write I. It's just like the symbol pi. Instead of writing 3.14, you just write the symbol pi. It's something like that. It's like it's easier to write I than the square root of -1. Every time you have to write the square root of -1, square root of -1, you just write I. But everyone knows by now when you write I, you mean the square root of -1. The square root of -1 is almost like an impossible calculation to perform, because there are no two numbers when multiplied will give you -1. Okay, if you square root 9, you are looking for two numbers when multiplied by itself will give you 9, and that number is 3 or -3. 3 times 3 will give you 9. -3 times -3 will give you 9. So if you square root -3, if you square root 9, sorry, you will get 3 or -3. But if you're trying to square root a negative number, that's impossible according to the rules of math, because there is no number when multiplied by itself will give you a negative number. So maths have find itself in a conundrum. So, but it's a number nonetheless, so they have to deal with it, and they call it I. And initially, when it was discovered, mathematicians didn't know what to do with it. Okay, but and the applications for it, like scientists and so. But with time, if you look into the history of imaginary number, you will find that it is very much useful now. So it continues by saying imaginary number is equal to a real number times I. So for example, 3I. I is the unit. I is like the simplest imaginary number. And any number multiplied by it, like multiples of it. So you can have a real number multiplied to I, but a number at the end of it is an imaginary number, even though you multiply it by a real number. Now, here you see 4 plus 2I. 4 plus 2I is more accurately called a complex number, because it has a real part and the imaginary part 2I. It's the imaginary part that is 2I. So I'm not too sure why this person put 4 plus 2I there, because that's a complex number. So please take note of that. Bear in mind when you look up things on YouTube, on internet, sorry, on the web, it's not the gospel truth, because it's persons that write it. So it is subject, everything is subject for criticism and review. So 4 plus 2, we will, according to what we are doing, will not be considered an imaginary number, because here we just talked about complex numbers, the real part and the imaginary part. So 4 plus 2I should not be in that list, according to what we are saying. So let's go into the website to see what is written there. Imaginary numbers. And here you have some properties about it. So you can do a little reading about it and give your view on it, because you have to make one statement about it. The history and the naming and so forth. And look here, they even talk about complex numbers, a plus bi, 3 plus 4i. So 4 plus 2i is not an imaginary number, it's a complex number. So for example, now, imaginary numbers. So we can have I, the letter I must be there. And most times like no, it's not in italics. You can have I, that's one I. You can have two I. You can have 100 I. You can have 3.7895 I must be there. And the list goes on. Okay, and you can simply say an imaginary number is the square root negative. Okay, and you can add to it. And that should suffice.